This video covers how to form Spanish commands in the usted and ustedes forms. What are commands? We use commands all the time in English, and so commands are sometimes in Spanish referred to as the imperative, or in Spanish, imperativo. This is another grammatical term for command in Spanish. Commands are direct. You're always talking directly to the person that you're giving a command to, and so you're not going to have qualifiers like there are in the subjunctive. When I say qualifiers, I mean things like, I hope that you have a clean room. You're not necessarily talking directly to the person, and so this would not be considered a command. In commands in Spanish, they're always spoken directly to the recipient of the command. Commands are either positive or negative, and that's the same as in English. We say, don't eat the sandwich or eat that sandwich. Don't read that story or read that story for your homework. These are either positive or negative. Same with Spanish. The subject is implied in your command. And so when we're talking about forming Spanish verbs, you can almost always determine the subject based on how it's conjugated, which is nothing new. But in commands, we only have 5 forms. We don't use the yo form in commands because you're never giving commands to yourself. And if you were to speak to yourself and give yourself a command, you would use the to form because you'd be talking to yourself as if you were talking to someone. For the sake of this video, however, we're only focusing on the usted and the ustedes forms. In the usted and ustedes commands, the verb conjugation that's going to happen is you're going to take the infinitive and turn it into the subjunctive. So just as you've been practicing how to form the subjunctive, you've already actually been learning the steps to forming commands. So how do we form that subjunctive again? Well, you take the infinitive and take the present yo tense, drop the O, and then add the opposite ending. And of course, if there are stem changers or irregularities in the present yo tense, those are going to carry over into subjunctive and, of course, therefore, commands. So, for example, AR verbs like nadar, the yo present tense would be nado. Drop the O, add the opposite ending, nade. This is subjunctive, and it's also used for the command to swim. So if you were giving the command to somebody to swim, you would say nade, at least in the usted form. Ustedes is similar, but you would just add the N because we're talking about ustedes. So it's the same for ER and IR endings, except you would put an A or an AN on at the end of the root. So here are some examples. Hablar, we take the present tense yo, hablo, drop the O and add the opposite ending to get hable usted or hablen ustedes. These are subjunctive that you can use in a subjunctive phrase, but you would also use these as commands if you wanted to ask someone usted or a group of people ustedes to speak. Comer, yo present tense is como. Drop the O, add the opposite ending, and you get coma and coman in usted and ustedes. Vivir, yo present tense is vivo. Drop the O, add the opposite ending, viva and vivan. These are easy examples because there are no stem changers, but if you're familiar with how subjunctive is formed, taking that yo present tense and dropping the O, you'll be able to form any verb in a command. So why don't you go ahead and inténtalo, try it. Remember to do both usted and ustedes. Here are the answers for those practice questions. We have usted listed first and ustedes listed second. So you see estudie, estudien, tome, tomen, baile, bailen, and then these two, 4 and 5, are stem changers. So we have piense, piensen, because the verb pensar has an E to IE stem change. so that does affect subjunctive and therefore commands. And then duerma and duerman, because the yo present tense is duermo, we drop the o and add the opposite ending. That's an o to ue stem change. Oftentimes with commands, we add it in it, and this is called direct object pronouns, or DOPs. Direct object pronouns act as a noun. They take the place of a noun, and we use them to simplify the sentence. So instead of saying, take the backpack, we would say, take it. Leave the backpack, leave it. Tell it to me would take the place of, tell the secret to me. We do this all the time in English too. Rather than saying the whole sentence, all of the details, we simplify it down to it, or him, or us. Similarly, in Spanish, we use direct object pronouns to take the place of a noun to simplify a sentence. So here are the direct object pronouns in Spanish, sometimes called DOPs. And the ones I want to focus on today are lo and la, and los and las. These will take the place of nouns in a command. And you'll see these come up. You don't need to master this per se, but I want you to know and be familiar with these when they're attached onto a command, either at the front or at the end, to know that it's talking about it, that the command is telling you to do something about something else, okay? Now, lo and la and los and las, when you're talking about something, say la mochila or el secreto, the direct object pronoun always matches the gender of the noun. And so if we're talking about la mochila, we would replace la mochila with the direct object pronoun of la. If we're talking about el secreto, the secret, we would replace that noun with the direct object pronoun lo, because it's masculine. Another thing that I want you to be aware of is that sometimes in Spanish commands, you're going to see that there's an accent above one of the syllables. And this happens because, say for example, the command comer would be coma. But when we add a direct object pronoun to the end, like lo, coma lo, say we were trying to give an example of eating the bread, say for example. So instead of saying eat the bread, coma el pan, we replace el pan with lo, because el pan is masculine, so we'd say comalo. Now, in Spanish, the accent always falls to the second to last vowel. And so when we don't have the accent, it says comalo. But we want to preserve the regular verb. And so if we say comalo, our listener may not understand that we're asking them to eat it. And so we have to add the accent to preserve the verb that's being commanded. And so here we see comalo, because we want the listener to hear the command coma. Similarly with tirela, throw it, we put the accent above tire, because without the accent it would say tirela. The accent would naturally fall to the second to last vowel, but we want it to be above the I, so we add an accent. So what if you want to attach it, the direct object pronoun, to a command? When we're talking about positive commands, we are going to be attaching the direct object pronoun, lo, la, sometimes mete, nos, vos, or os, to the end of the command. And this happens when it's positive, so when you're telling someone that you want them to do something. So if we're giving the command, tomar la pastilla, to take the pill, we're starting with the infinitive, tomar and la pastilla. We conjugate tomar to the command, tome la pastilla, If we want to simplify it even more, instead of saying the whole thing la pastilla, we could simplify it to tómela. We added the direct object pronoun that replaces la pastilla to the end because we're saying a positive command. We want them to do something, not to not do something. Note the accent that we added to preserve the command that we're saying. Otherwise it would be tomela, but we want it to be tómela. One more time. Here we have leer and las instrucciones. And this is actually an error. So when we conjugate leer to the command or subjunctive, we have lea. If you caught that, kudos to you. Lea las instrucciones. If we want to simplify it even more and take out las instrucciones, we would say léalas with an accent above the E, because otherwise it'd be lealas. Te toca a ti. It's your turn. So try your hand at forming the commands for each of these using your vocabulary from this unit. Pay attention to what kind of command you're giving. Is it usted or ustedes? Start by conjugating the verb in the subjunctive and then add the ending onto it. Now, if we know that the cast is el y eso, we know that the direct object pronoun is going to be lo that replaces it. So keep that in mind. Make all of these positive commands so the direct object pronouns will come at the end of the command. So how'd you do? Here are the answers. We have cómprela, llévenlo, rómpala, bébelo. If you're wondering where the la, lo came from, think back to what these vocab words are. We replaced those vocab words. So the prescription, la receta, turns into la. La replaces the whole phrase, the prescription. The cast, el yeso, turns into lo. Leg, la pierna, turns into la. Cough syrup, el jarabe, turns into lo. We added accents on these as well to preserve the original command. So we know that not all commands are going to be positive. A lot of times we say don't do something, don't do it. These are considered negative commands. When we have negative commands, we're going to form them in the same way for the usted and ustedes forms using that subjunctive, but the direct object pronoun gets bumped around. It's no longer going to come at the end, but it will come before the command and after the no. So when we're forming a negative command, we say no and then the command. And if there's a direct object pronoun in there, it comes between the no and the command. So for example, don't do it, no lo haga, the lo comes in between. Or don't eat it, no la coma, the la, the direct object pronoun, comes between the no and the la. Different from the positive commands, you cannot simply attach DOPs to the end of a negative command. So what if those same commands that we just practiced before are negative? We'd say no la compre. We put the la between the no and the command. No lo lleven. Don't wear the cast. Don't break a leg. No la rompa. Don't drink the cough syrup. No lo beban. You'll see that there isn't an accent on these commands. That's because the direct object pronoun isn't attached to throw off the pronunciation, so we don't need accents in the negative commands. Now it's your turn. Try your hand at these. Again, pay attention to who you're forming the command for, and also don't forget to put in the no to make it a negative command. Here are the answers. Don't eat the food, la comida, turns to la. Don't take the pill, la pastilla, turns to simply la. Don't have an X-ray. La radiografía turns to la, and don't get a shot. La inyección turns to la. So just to recap what we learned in this commands video for the usted and ustedes commands only. Positive commands have direct object pronouns, or the it, attached to the end of a verb, or of a command. So these are only for positive commands. For negative commands, this direct object pronoun is sandwiched between the no and the command.